wonderful to be here. I'll talk about quite a different subject, how to deal with diversity. And let me start by giving you an idea why perhaps it's the biggest issue of today. Obviously technology is important, but I've seen so many cultures where it's just seen a bit differently. If you just look at how phones are used, or the telephone. By the way, you remember the telephone was introduced in the 20s? And after the introduction of the telephone, there were more traffic jams because people could connect at a distance. So the bottom line of my technology story will be the more we digitalize, the more we need analog. And we're not used to thinking this way because now I live in Amsterdam, at least in the weekend, and it's an interesting place. 7% of people in Amsterdam didn't have Dutch parents 15 years ago. Do you know the percentage today? 52% of people living in Amsterdam don't have Dutch parents. And that's beyond expatriates, okay? I was in Miami a month ago, and there was a sign, "We speak English here." And they lied. I haven't heard a word of English. Now, this is happening to the world. We mix like hell, while we were so neatly organized where the Americans were in America, the Japanese were in Japan, and thank God the French stayed in France, right? On top of that, we don't only mix internationally, we mix in a sense of gender. Suddenly we have more females at the workplace. We get young people, the millennials, with great ideas that we never used to. And it's quite interesting that we get a diversity of diversity. So if you have a young American female talking to an old Ghanese male, and there is a trouble, and I can guess there is trouble, it's with most young American females, what is causing what? Their age, their nationality, or their gender? And nobody knows. So diversity is an issue. Now, what is the problem with diversity? Is that our models suck, especially in HR. Now, only the word, human resources. What an awful word. So let me start with saying what are the two major challenges in diversity that is increasing. First of all, our models are bipolar. I'll come back to that in a second. And secondly, our models are culturally biased. Let me give you an example. How many books are written every year about leadership? Don't worry, it's 800, of which 720 are written by Americans. That includes the revised edition, which means they contradict what they wrote before, because it didn't work, right? And they do case studies through presidents. Now, it's kind of interesting, because if we take the leadership models by Americans, how can you recognize them? Now, what was the most quoted competence in an American book on leadership that a leader needed to have? You remember 10 years ago? Courage. Another word for idiot, right? What is it today? Caution. I have good news for you, both don't work. And that's the introduction to bipolar models. You go to China, you read a book on Chinese leadership, and it's all about yin, yang, Mao, Fao, Tao. And you say, yeah, that's Chinese. You read a French book on leadership, and it's, did you go to the École Polytechnique? Are you from Paris and male? Grand patron. Yeah? In other words, our models are culturally biased. How can we deal with diversity? Because if you have a multicultural team, what kind of a leader would you like? Top down, bottom up, yin, yang, what do you want? And we need to rethink our models that go beyond culture. I'll come back to that in a second. Second point is the idea of bipolarity. Let me use some more crap. Myers-Briggs, ever heard of Myers-Briggs? Yeah? What is the basis of Myers-Briggs? If you score high on thinking, you score low on feeling. What kind of crap is that? Why is my feeling at the cost of my thinking? Because the questionnaire was built like that. Like my colleague says, Charles Hamden Turner, mostly developed by two housewives that developed the questionnaire over the weekend. Now, I looked at that questionnaire, can't be a full weekend. It was a Saturday morning with a hangover, right? I read the work of Carl Jung, and he starts his book with 7 yin and yang diagrams to explain that the quality of thinking depends on how you connect it to your feeling. So, let me summarize. The companies we have created are based on bipolar thinking. Are you centralized or decentralized? MBAs, they're the worst. In the Netherlands, better known as mediocre but arrogant. And I have one. And you ask MBAs, why would an organization centralize and why would it decentralize? And it's not that McKinsey needs work in between the two. Now, it's kind of interesting because if you think about what they're doing is making lists why it should centralize and lists why it should decentralize, right? And then I say, stop, think first. Most of them get nervous because normally that's not part of their education, right? And I say, I'll help you, what is the only reason for a company to centralize and the only reason for a company to decentralize? And the answer, I'm not interested in yours, by the way, is that the only reason for centralization is decentralization. Because if you're not decentralized, there's nothing to centralize. Got it? Right? Now, and that is not captured by bipolar models, okay? So if we take our human body, is that centralized or decentralized? And the answer is yes, okay? We have centralized the information of an activity that is decentral. And the more our activities are decentral, the more we need central information about those activities, right? So my plea is, including analog and digital, one cannot do without the other, right? Now, let us see the companies we have created with these wonderful type of bipolar thoughts, right? And you know them. I love Apple. I mean, Apple is really the essence of innovation. You know, they had a laptop, they ripped off the screen, they sold you the screen, call it an iPad, and make the money by selling you keyboards, right? Bloody idiots. And a new cable is 25 euros, made in China for 6 cents, right? And we, as lemmings, we follow them. Interesting. Now, how can we get rid of this? Let me first say a wonderful experience about non-bipolar thinking. I was in Japan 15 years ago, and there were a lot of American consultants helping the Japanese to avoid a financial crisis. Now they're there to create one, right? And it's kind of interesting. They say, you Japanese, like Indians, you really need to be more objective. Hi, which means in Japan, I don't get a clue of what you're saying. And the Americans explained it again, but louder. You need to be more objective. All these networks, and they realized they didn't have a good word for objectivity. And they borrowed it from the Chinese and called it kyakanteki. This was, by the way, with HSBC, all HSBC people. And subjectivity is shukanteki. Do you know the etymological root of this word? Now, kyakanteki means the outsider's viewpoint. And for the cynical Japanese, the American viewpoint. That's objective. Shukanteki is the insider's viewpoint. Now, the model I want to give, and this is an example, is the following. Namely, we have to crack the line and combine. So have a look. What is this? And what we came up with is the reconciliation is just different viewpoints from the same object. And what we call dilemma reconciliation, creating a new reality out of diversity, is that the Japanese garden is the metaphor for inviting you to connect different viewpoints, insiders and outsiders. In fact, you see the same bridge from the top and from the side, okay? Now that is a new paradigm that I'm trying to get across for the last 30 years, and nobody understands. Now, let me tell you what this means for an advertising campaign. You remember HSBC, most prize-winning one, because it's based on connecting different viewpoints to be the world's local bank. And why was this advertising campaign so successful across the globe? Because they went beyond culture. Their theme was connect different viewpoints. These are the words HSBC used. Let's apply this to technology and HR, this way of thinking. I very often use this example because it's based on our research for the last 35 years. We asked by now 140,000 people, you're riding in a car driven by a close friend. Your friend is speeding, going, let's say, 50 kilometers an hour where you're allowed to go 30, and your friend hits a pedestrian, as you can see. You come to court, and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. 2 questions. First, what is the right of your friend to expect you to testify to the lower figure, to lie for you? My friend has a definite right, some right, my friend has no right to expect that. Second question is, would you lie? Yes or no? Okay? Now, before engaging you in this little quiz, who would like to be in this situation? I've never seen a person saying, right? Why? Regardless of where you're from, male, female, India, outside of India, this is a dilemma. There's nobody in the world that doesn't want to help friends, and there's nobody in the world that doesn't have something with the truth, with, let's say, the laws that protects our children to be crunched, except, obviously, New Delhi. Now, let's look at this. This is a dilemma, and we're asking you now for your answer. That's where culture creeps in. So culture kills half of us in case of crucial situations. So what have companies doing about this? And they talk about ethics and integrity. I was with Merrill Lynch. Obviously, their first value was integrity, right? Now, let's have a look at the different scores. I'll come back to integrity in a second. These are the percentage of people who said, my friend has no right or some right, and I will not help by lying. So you see the Swiss, 97% say that. 3% in Switzerland speak Italian, right? Yeah. Italy is not on the chart because PowerPoint can't deal with negative scores, right? And you see all the Protestants, from Germany to Switzerland, they are more in you should not lie, right? And you go at the bottom and you see Korea and Venezuela, by the way, South Korea, where they help their friends, okay? Now, obviously, if you stop here, the top will say, Koreans, they're corrupt. You can't trust them, they always help their friends. Till I did a workshop in Korea, and the Korean says, Americans are corrupt. I said, what? Yeah, you can't trust them, they won't even help their friends. So the question is, by what do you want to be corrupted, right? The point is that this is just the result of half-truth. Now, how do you solve this if these cultures work together in a multicultural team? And values, as you know, very popular. The most quoted value is integrity, right? Do we go for uniformity or it depends? It depends is, I can't answer it. What happened to the pedestrian, right? And I asked an Italian, what is, it depends. And the Italian says, I can't answer it. What happened to the car, right? While some say, I don't mind. Friends will not be helped by lying, right? Now, let's take this wonderful value of integrity that can solve everything. So I was with Merrill Lynch, obviously financial services, so their first value was integrity, yeah, because they didn't have it. I always love values of companies. I know exactly what they don't have, right? I live in Amsterdam, having 3 daughters, so the top of our values is we don't kill men here, right? It's one of our values, but it makes our guests nervous, right? So if a company says we have integrity, I get nervous, right? And so I said, how does this integrity help you to give the correct answer to the car accident dilemma? And there was an American who stood up and said, sorry, I don't understand your question. How can integrity be different than my friend not expecting me to lie and me not lie? There was a Korean in the room who said, sorry, John, I disagree. How can integrity be different than me helping my friend? And everybody in the room, this was the top 80 of Merrill Lynch, understood both, because they were human beings having this dilemma. But it's their culture that kills half of them, right? Now, what do you do in a multicultural team where Koreans think you should help your friend and Americans think you should not lie? And that's the problem we're living in. And I learned this in Japan. And they said, you know, you have the law and my friend. Correct the line. And what we will do in Japan is we will convince our friend that he should tell the truth in court himself. And that's how you connect the opposites. And that's integrity. Integrity is creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. 2 more examples and I'll stop. This is very important in the way we use digital across cultures. This is a model of different ways of how we relate to human beings. It's based on the work of Kurt Lewin, who went as a German to America, and he says, Americans are amazing, you hardly know them, and they talk to you, even if you don't know them. It's because they are like peaches, where privacy is small, namely the nut in the center, and there's a lot of accessible flesh in the peach. So the end result is the refrigerator is public, right? You hardly know people, you go to their refrigerator. In America, you need my car, take my car. Have you tried this in Germany? Take my Mercedes? Are you kidding? It's very private. Take my wife, but leave my Mercedes, okay? And this leads to a specific relationship. Cut the crap, what is this about? Even titles. When I got my PhD, they suddenly called me in the university Dr. Trompenaars. But the same people called me Fons at the barbecue. It's a specific relationship. In Germany, the coconut, you're hair doctor everywhere. Why? Because you want to protect a big private life. So initially, there is no relationship. They call you Sie and not Du. But after some time, especially in Munich around October, it's called the Bierfeste, you share everything. And your wife is called Frau Doctor, and you are hair doctor. Now, the big problem in international business between diverse cultures is where the peach meets the coconut, is where the man meets the wife. It's where, etc. And how can we resolve this? Because in specific cultures, it's called low context cultures, digital is easy. In high touch cultures, the coconut, what do? And this is the dilemma, high tech versus high touch. I was at a retail conference where the retailers were talking about how they integrated internet into their shopping pattern. And Amazon and Google were presenting how they were building shops because they were lacking face-to-face. High tech in banking, and this is high touch. What we need is the blended solution where the analog is helped by the digital and the digital by the analog. And that's very often forgotten. Don't think that computers will take over everything. At the end of the day, you need the other side. And I'm, by the way, not contradicting what Brian was saying earlier. It's wonderful, and there are much better high-tech systems that can replace some of the human beings. But there are moments where you say, wow, like the telephone, the more we have digital connections, the more we want to travel, right? Now, a final one is, and I'll skip this one, sequential versus synchronic because of time. I'm more the synchronic person where 1:45 can become 2. And just in time is really combining sequential and synchronic. Now, one thing is, and you remember this, the minimal viable product is the reconciliation between learning from mistakes and developing perfection. Developing perfection is aim, 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 gee, I forgot to shoot. And learning from mistakes is shoot, 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 aim. And the minimal viable product is you learn through a ever-progressing perfect system. The final one is about leadership, and I'll stop here. And that is, what type of leadership do we need beyond cultures? Is it like our wonderful HSBC campaign is saying? Do we go bottom up or top down? And there is a model that goes beyond culture. And that is the model where bottom up is the risk of lost democratic leadership. It's the title of a book with the subtitle, The Dutch and Swedish Disease, Too Much Democracy. We know from the Middle East that this is a risk too. Follow the leader and you all drop down the cliff because there's no feedback. There is this concept of the servant leader. The servant leader has one thing in mind: how can I help others to climb higher on the ladder? And that is the Mandelas. That's the icons of every religion. From Hinduism, Buddhism, you take Jesus Christ walking on a road, and he sees a man crying. He says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "I'm blind." He says, "Open your eyes and see." And he could see. And Jesus, happy, the man happy, sees a female crying. He says, "What's the matter?" "I can't walk, I'm paralyzed." "Stand up and walk." She could walk, and Jesus, happy, and the man. He walks on, sees another man crying. He says, "What's the matter?" He says, "I'm Dutch." And Jesus said next to him, both cried. Yeah. So there are limits to servant leadership. Now, our final point is, what can technology do with this? And this is my last 10 seconds. We developed apps where culture is made hard. This is information about doing business across cultures, generation, gender. We got team performance apps, career apps. We got the dilemmas of mergers and acquisitions app, the dilemmas of risk app, the dilemmas of quality. We got the dilemmas of safety app, the dilemmas of supplier app. We got innovation app. And thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Fons.